Namaskar. Today is the 17th of August, Tuesday, and welcome to Daily Global Insights with Sri and Sri. This is episode number 226. In global news, President Biden addresses the nation. The buck stops with me. We did the right thing. We cannot be there forever. I am the fifth president to preside over this Afghan war, and this Afghan war was not about nation building. These were the salient points that he mentioned in his talk. Sridharji, welcome to PGurus channel, and your thoughts on presidential address, and what did you find interesting about what he said, sir?
Good morning to everybody. Welcome, namaskar, and looking forward to another great day. Mr. Biden at last came out of his holiday and he decided it's appropriate for him to come and spend 15 minutes and address the nation, which he did around roughly 3:50 p.m. yesterday, East Coast U.S. time. He made his case effectively to state, he took the advice. He did what was necessary. He inherited a timetable which was set by the previous president, namely May withdrawal. And his observations were they did the right thing, and they looked at the intelligence input, they looked at the defense input, and as you rightly pointed out, that this is not about nation building. We have done our job, and our mission was different, and so therefore we decided to move. And he expressed extreme surprise that the Afghan army collapsed very rapidly without a fight. That was not anticipated. Now he is going to do what is required, not only to make sure that the American citizens who are left behind are protected, but whatever promises were made to both allies as well as the Afghans who helped on ground will be met. So this way his case, it looks like, in my humble observation, he tried to blame everybody except himself. So he passed the buck. He says, notwithstanding the fact he said the buck stops with me, the buck did not stop with him. It seems like he was generous in passing around the buck to everybody.
Sir, one observation, he says that this was not about nation building, but according to news reports, there are close to 20,000 Afghans, and if you add their families, about 50,000 Afghans who have helped this government over a period of 20 years, and they are all afraid for their lives. How is the United States going to take care of these people? If they did not participate in nation building, then why employ such a high number, in your opinion, sir?
Well, it's very interesting that these observations have been captured by the media, and so media is sparing no second thought for Mr. Biden. They're going after him, as you rightly observed. So first and foremost, the disconnect. No, United States was engaged in nation building. 20,000 Afghans were involved, and when you add those families, roughly more than 50,000 people who had promised that they would eventually, when US leaves, that they would be given the appropriate support. So United States was very much in nation building, number one. The second point, which if I might continue, is that the US forces, the Afghan forces, were not prepared to fight. That was his observation. Wrong. Afghan forces fought along with United States Army during the course. More than 50,000 people have lost lives. More than 50,000 Afghan forces have lost their lives. So therefore, it's incorrect to make a statement that the Afghan forces were not prepared to fight. That's the second disconnect in his speech. The third disconnect in his speech, if I may continue, and then I'll hand it back to you. The third disconnect in his speech is that the misjudgment of the government. The government, the Afghan forces have remained. The government, the head of the government, was the first one to flee along with his deputy. And, by indications, he seems to have been stopped. He attempted to flee the country in a helicopter and taking 4 cars. Somewhere he was caught. So there has been a complete misjudgment on the part of the administration. And so to come in front of the audiences, the U.S. people, U.S. public, and make a statement of this, leaving out some of the key points, which has been roundly critiqued by the mainstream media, with no exception.
A lot of questions being asked about the prowess of Biden's foreign policy. Senator Lindsey Graham says Trump would not have withdrawn from Afghanistan if chaos was going to be the outcome. The former Afghan advisor to military tells US handed everything over to the Taliban when they decided to leave. Mike Waltz says it is the same Obama team that participated in the Iraq disaster and the playbook that was played out. Jack Keane, a retired major general who is now a Fox analyst, says that Taliban may have paid out the Afghan army. He also points out that the factual errors. He also points out the factual errors on Biden's claims that we just went over. Sridharji, the fundamental point here is that there appears to have been some sort of a tacit understanding between the current government or whatever was there and the Taliban, because looks like the forces did not put up much of a fight. That is what people are saying, looking at satellite imagery and saying that, look, we didn't see any tank movement, we didn't see any artillery, fallout or anything of that sort. So, what really do you think happened there, and what was the basis by which Biden went to withdraw the forces? People are saying that he just listened to intelligence, which turned out to be wrong. Your thoughts, sir?
No, I think it's it's an interesting set of corollary questions that you're bringing forth. I know Mr. Jack Keane, or retired Major General Jack Keane of the U.S. Army, has pointed out that maybe it is Taliban had paid out, and basically they said they did. Now, the other side, the adjacent media report that also points out is that many of these Afghan forces were given a tacit support that some logistical support will be provided as they take on the Taliban forces, or the Taliban guerrillas, or whatever you want to call jihadis, terrorists, guerrillas, or the Talibanis. So they were prepared to, provide tacit support. So there's another set of claims that's coming out. When United States withdrew, they basically withdrew without the tacit support. The Afghan army says, you can give me all kinds of equipment and so on. I still have not fought wars. All the stuff that I have done is on the basis of US having logistical support. That being the deterrent, we were able to go in and fight a battle. So it looks like US may have reneged on the tacit commitment that was given to the Afghan forces. So also this is my kind of concluding observations on this. On one hand, you say there's a civil war. On the other hand, you are saying Afghan forces, you fight with Taliban. Well, what does that construe? That's one. The 1B to that is all governments have been conducting negotiations with Taliban in Qatar. Right? Qatar being the formal headquarters of the Qataris. That's where they have been camping and they have been conducting.
Talibanis, I thought.
Yeah, Taliban have been conducting their activities. So you have on one hand conducting negotiations, and then you are saying, hey, the only negotiation that was going on there is basically to say that there would be a transitional government comprising of both Taliban and the mainstream Afghans, which is namely a sort of a coalition power sharing arrangement. But having said that, you can't tell the Afghan army, go and fight them if they don't, if they don't agree to the transitional government. It doesn't cut. So the Afghan forces, why would they be motivated? On one hand, these fellows are telling me, work with them to be part of the government. On the other hand, they're telling me, pick up the arms and fight and shoot them to protect yourself. It doesn't work. So therefore, what did the Taliban? Taliban proved everybody wrong. Nobody accepts this. Taliban proved everybody wrong. They're issuing messages from domestic, and they're issuing messages from Qatar. They're basically saying, we'll come back. Allah has given us victory, and we will now serve the people. That's the message. Today's message, we are giving amnesty to all women. Women form the government. The summary is what people are saying is the truth. The truth is this particular administration has a miserable foreign policy. Miserable foreign policy. Doesn't matter whether it is Africa, doesn't matter whether it is Afghanistan, doesn't matter whether it is Syria, doesn't matter whether it is Iraq, doesn't matter as to what is happening in ASEAN and South China Sea, right? It has no foreign policy. There is a loss of loosey-goosey stuff that is going on. That is the overarching problem that the United States faces, which is the reason why Mr. Rick Scott is saying, is he competent to run and be commander-in-chief of the U.S. Army?
And in related news, Lloyd Austin, the U.S. Defense Secretary, says that he has no intention of resigning. Taliban will not get access to the reserves in the United States, says the United States official. The first officer, so whatever the snafu that happened, someone in the United States government has to bear responsibility for this. And if it is not the Secretary of Defense, who, in your opinion, should be that person, sir? Should that be Mr. Joe Biden? He should say that now I'm not feeling too well. I will step down and make way for the Vice President. Your thoughts, sir?
He has answered the question. The buck stops with me. So therefore, he was found to be incompetent. He must go.
So this is our opinion, because we are looking at the big picture. Also, viewers should draw your own conclusions. You should look at who was at the helm of affairs when the Benghazi massacre of United States officials happened in Libya. And you will know how the continuity is being proven again, and how disaster again strikes at the Foreign Office. At least 7 dead in chaos at the Kabul airport as US troops struggle to maintain order. Many of you may have seen this video where people were clinging on to the plane and they all fell from a height to their death. Very, very sad. The United States evacuates 800 people aboard a single C-17 jet amidst chaos in the Kabul airport. Sridharji, on one side, we are seeing the Western embassies saying that they are going to take their people out. On the other side, we are seeing Russian and Chinese embassies saying that they are going to stay put. So what is your take on the ground on this, and why these two differing opinions about the safety of the consulates?
Let me just wrap the previous segment in one other important point, and then we respond. Al-Qaeda exists in some form or the other, apparently in all provinces. So there is the footprint of Al-Qaeda in Afghanistan, in all provinces, and they're already having dialogue with the Taliban. Okay, so this is an important data point which has been ignored or left out, which again, these retired generals, those who have knowledge of on-ground situation in Afghanistan, have pointed out. Okay, many Indian media, which is mainstream media, is also pointing out this. The rationale being that it causes tumultuous circumstances from a security point of view in the region. Now, to respond to your other point, it is more a deterrent rather than there is a fear. For example, China has come out and stated that it is conducting its operations business as usual. It is business as usual. That's what they're saying. So they have not evacuated anybody. On the contrary, other people like EU and even India have started to evacuate, basically fearing what circumstances, what kind of direction the Taliban government can take based on the past experiences and past inferences. There's nothing that says tomorrow they come in and they're going to have a major kind of change of opinion. But what is causing alarm amongst the many Western governments, including United States, is that there is no transitional government. There is not even 15-20% of the transitional government from any of the past regimes, which is the civilian government as opposed to the present format or the format under which Taliban operated. So this is the reason, sir, why one set of people are evacuating and the other set of people are continuing to stay. Probably Russians are staying back as well.
Yes, indeed they are. And Russian embassy further claims that the Afghanistan president fled with cars and helicopter full of money. You mentioned this in the initial statement. Afghanistan chaos caused by hasty US withdrawal, says China, another embassy which is staying put. So very, very interesting information coming out of Afghanistan. Since we already touched on it, let's go to the next topic here. US defeat in Afghanistan is a chance for lasting peace, says Iran. So all the neighbors are starting to weigh in. threats exist in Somalia.
All the appropriate allies of Taliban, may I add.
Yes, yes. Threats exist in Somalia, Afghanistan, Syria, and Iraq. Al Qaeda and ISIS are very much present, says US, I think US defense experts. So these all these different nations. Now, what has the US given rise to? When they pull out of Afghanistan in such a hasty manner, looks like now they may have spawned not one, not two, but five caliphates, all of whom are now going to start jostling for power and say that I am the original caliphate and I am the one that everybody else should be listening to, the 61 Islamic nations of the world. Sir, your thoughts? This seems to be like a khichdi of a magnitude not imagined before.
Many people have seen some of the comments in our, this Daily Global Insight section. Why are we touching Africa? We should only focus on United States and India. Right now, I'm specifically responding to this comment, which has come from at least a couple of people. The reason is the main danger is not just in Afghanistan alone. The main danger is the two flashpoints. We already named one, which is called the triple I. Iran, Iraq, Israel is a flashpoint. Then you have, the Syria, Lebanon is another flashpoint. Then the African Sahel region, which we have pointed out, you have right from, west coast to east coast, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Algiers, going all the way across to Somalia, Nigeria, and Eritrea, and so on. So you have a whole swag of issues cropping up there. Then now you have Afghanistan, adjacent to Iran. So therefore, now you mentioned five caliphates. We don't need to say anything. You please go and do your own research and figure out as to what is going on across these zones that we mentioned, and you Google yourself and find out, who are all the people. And I think some of the names were listed by Sriji. So you can go back and take a look. So we have a major flashpoint emanating. Remember, United States until Trump and this even to some extent Bush administration had put these conditions, but they were partially lifted under Obama, reinstalled during the Trump administration, now lifted, which is namely specific countries. You can go and look at those countries which were identified as potential areas of risk from a visa and grant of entry to people. Okay, so the reason why we are touching all this is you have one big issue called the China issue, then you have a second big issue called as these mini territorial battles, and the third is the lurking caliphate and terrorism emanating from the various flashpoints that we have been covering in Daily Global Insights.
And as if this is all not enough, the thoughtless way in which many illegal immigrants were allowed access into the United States has now started to raise its ugly head. These people were not tested for COVID, and now you are seeing states such as Florida, most of the South in United States, because see, this is an unfettered, unregulated entry, and we think it was about 500,000. We don't even know the numbers. Nobody is willing to part with the numbers. And then, not as if it wasn't enough that they allowed them unfettered access, they took them, they bussed them all over the country. They also flew them to all over the country. This is a disaster of a gargantuan proportions that the Biden administration has committed. And then they go and ask the vice president to tackle it, and the vice president is not there to be seen. So I don't know what is going on, sir. Let's hope that the control comes back on this stuff. This is madness, in my opinion. Japan, Thailand, and other nations are continuing to battle COVID-19 problems as the Delta variant cases keep rising. Sridharji, why is this, shooting in the foot phenomenon that Biden administration did in the first 3 months of its presidency?
Well, I think without mincing words, they seem to have 3-4 objectives. One of the objectives is the stimulus programs. They need to justify the stimulus programs. The stimulus programs, we will show it in the markets chart, should have ended in first week of December with the last tranche of 995 billion. So they need, because many Democratic-led councils and governments are bankrupt. Republicans were steadfast in not permitting the COVID money to be used to retool and put capital into the balance sheets of totally inept and inefficient administrations. I'm not suggesting they're only blue, they can also be red having. So they didn't want the money to be going towards, they said, states, you fix your problem as to the appropriate. That's number one. Number two, they seem to have this policy agenda is coming back from the Obama time, which is harmonization of 11 to 12 million immigrants or illegal immigrants, and many of the enforcements that took place during the Trump regime. During the Trump regime, again in Daily Global Insights, we have shared the data. The net impact of during the 4 years, number of people who came in and number of people who went back because of the tighter enforcement policies, and the border wall was being constructed and ICE having the specific rights. The net impact was 400,000 people coming into United States under various kind of harmonization programs. Today, just in the last kind of 4 months, is it 4 months or 6 months? We have seen close to, up until we have given the data up until July, we have 1.19 million people who have come in, and close to 1 million people have been apprehended. Why? Because they found success, whichever way you want to call it, they found success in the election battles. In terms of, we don't know, it's still to be proven, but I think Sri Iyer has written a very good book, and people should read the book, and you can draw your own inferences as to how the election was conducted. So they have a multifarious agenda around this illegal immigration. Remember, Cubans are being sent back, but those who are from the Central American countries like Nicaragua, El Salvador, Ecuador, El Salvador, Mexico, and they are being allowed to come in. So you seem to have a different policy, including Vice President Madam visited these countries and supported a $400 million aid to these countries, so that she feels that that will help the development in the region and prevent the illegals to come in. Again, she went on to say it is because of climatic conditions these people are trying to flee these places. So which is very, very unpleasant in terms of a person of a vice president's stature to making these kinds of observations. This is all one can infer, Sriji, and I think you are as much, your research and your data that you have used to publish your book has some of these salient features as to why these floodgates have been opened. And let me finish. The worst, which again we have showed in Daily Global Insights, which has been shared by some of the media, many of these illegal immigrants are being located and sent to various states. The governors are not aware, the councillors are not aware, the mayors are not aware, the local administration is not aware, the school districts are not aware, the police are not aware. None of the people who manage the basic administration process from ground up to the state level, they are not aware when these people will land. They have been sent by buses, they have been sent by other forms of transport. Some of them even have been carried in planes. None of them tested, and they're all located. They feel they have no obligation to report as part of a federal structure. So what you are now seeing is this explosion. What you are seeing is rising COVID cases. Many of the states, we will cover that in a minute, in the states like Florida, Texas, etc. They all have, Florida has shot up to number 2 position. Number 1 is obviously the Californians. They carry almost 35% of the active COVID cases. Number 2 is now, fortunately or unfortunately, number 3 and number 4 still is Virginia and Maryland. And then number 5 is Texas, which naturally is the habitat for all this first port of call landing immigrants. And Arizona is also making its way up, notwithstanding the fact it is not so densely populated. So these are all the things that one can infer rather than you can look at the data. I mean, we don't need to listen to our words, but you can look at the data, and it will become evident.
And let's take a look at United States news. House moderates reject Pelosi's simultaneous vote proposal on spending bill. Sir, this is something that DGI, Daily Global Insights, has been emphasizing for a long time, that this kind of reckless spending is going to blow up on the faces of tighter elections for the Democrats. And now you're seeing that the moderates, I suppose it is Manchin, looks like he wasn't pacified by all the sops given to him, sir.
So Manchin is Senate. So you have House representatives
you're right.
The arms. Yeah, sure, raising in arms to say, hey, you can't hold our infrastructure budget to ransom with this other budget item. So therefore, get past the infrastructure bill. So at least the benefits and employment begins to flow in the states, because many of these people are in border states or borderline constituencies. They want money to flow in for right projects, and that has been a bipartisan acceptance, and many of the projects we have listed seems to make sense in terms of the infrastructure.
Pardon me, I was looking at something else. Border Patrol takes on all the counterfeit COVID vaccination cards from China. So now China is printing fake vaccination cards, sir?
They are. Actually, there is images of the mail arriving, plus the images of the CDC stamped COVID forms. I mean, we'll publish it in PGurus articles, but it is astonishing. Yes, they have seized a number of them, has been seized in states, in some of the states. We'll share the data with you, and we'll also share the images of the CDC forms.
Yes, and Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and Cory Bush plead with the Democrats and Biden to open the floodgates for Afghan migrants, not to lose a moment of opportunity to bring them in and support them. So this is the kind of stuff that they should not be talking about. This is way above their perception grade. And I thought, for a change, these progressives have kept their mouth shut. There you go. Again, they have started making noises.
Indeed, sir. I think that if you tell the progressives, Jayapal, Ilhan, Rashida, and AOC, and so on, they would like to create a mini set of countries in each of the 50 plus states of United States. So we need to have mini Somalia, mini Afghanistan, mini Iran, and mini Syria, and etc. So they have their own, or mini Central American republics to be replicated across United States. That seems to be the agenda. They don't understand that United States has got a 28.5. I'm not counting the 3.5 that's going to happen. I'm not counting the deficit. Even otherwise, that's going to come in. It's roughly close to about $900 billion in the 2022 budget. So we're getting close to $29.5 trillion. They're not satisfied. Okay. And there are certain Nobel laureate economists who seem to think you're not going to be alive to pay. So therefore, keep on borrowing money. And what you do, you add the interest cost, then you borrow more money. So therefore, that is the spirit of the new thinking, or the new normal that's prevalent in United States.
And in India news, we will help Afghan partners, Hindus and Sikhs, to come to India. India hosts the UNSC session and presides over the meeting on Afghanistan. Afghan students in Indian varsities fear for their lives and seek a visa extension. Viewers, I want to emphasize this again. India's leadership at UNSC is only for a month. Half of that month has already elapsed. Let's hope that India makes the best use of the remaining 15 days or 14 days or whatever is left to try and get some clarity on the Afghan situation. So your thoughts, this is something that is logical, but how much do you think the anti-CAA resolution that got passed, thanks to the egging of some organizations in the United States, slowed down the implementation process of CAA in Indian government, you think, sir?
I mean, the Indian government always is cognizant of its image as it tries to build its profile. How much of it has it contributed towards the slowdown? It certainly seems to have slowed down. The only thing that one can say is that the law stands. This has been absolutely, when they say I think the law is being contested in Supreme Court, but they are very steadfast on three things. One is Article 370 stands. They're steadfast on the CAA. Only the National Register of Citizens, these are the three big laws. The National Register for Citizens is the only one that's left pending, if I am correct. But the other two things stand. I think they're going to execute it, especially the CAA. They will enforce and execute because it affects a number of states, especially in the eastern states, most notably Assam. So I believe that they will move forward. But has it slowed? Yeah, to some extent it has.
Saudi Aramco in advanced discussions with Reliance Industries to invest $25 billion and take a 20% stake in the RIL oil unit. Rural India outpaces demand and consumption relative to urban areas. Afghan situation will impact trade with India, but it's not a big number. India now reaches record vaccine targets and appears on course to reach its October-November targets. We are going to put up the COVID numbers. Let us start with the numbers that you talked about for California, because we need to start doing this thing quickly, sir. We're already in our 31st minute. So if you could have the chart for California, US, please. Thank you. Sridharji, take it away.
This is the world chart.
Yes, yeah. Yes. This is the US chart now.
Okay, so the US chart basically will show to you that we are close to about how many? We are close to the active cases have jumped quite dramatically. The active cases are at 6.778 million. Please keep that number and go back and check what we have been saying. 6.778 million, of which the active cases in California is 1.88 million. The Florida is number 2 ranked now, 572,000. Maryland is 459,000. Washington State is about 263. Texas is about 238. So you can see the numbers. I'm talking about the active case numbers are substantive in number, and the number is 6.77. So what is it? What does this mean? This simply means that the Delta variant is very active in United States, and which has forced the CDC and the US administration to almost get ready to approve a booster dose, and the booster dose will be taken and given 8 months after vaccine 1 and vaccine 2 are complete.
And if you could have the world chart, please. World chart.
Yes, in the world chart, you will find that in the world chart, United States, as usual, leads in terms of the active cases.
Yes.
Yeah, 6.778. Again, go back and if you see the charts, you will see United Kingdom, which was roughly around 800, 900, has now got 1.3 million active cases. That's 400,000 cases, which is equivalent to, whether you accept Indian numbers or not, it's equivalent to the total active cases in India. Compare the population of UK, compare the population of India. Then you have Spain, which has moved up 650. Iran is now to 600. Brazil is 550. Actually, Brazil has done a terrific job, and it was number 2, number 3, depending on the day, but they have been able to contain it quite well, and they're now in the 500s. Russia, which was also in the big number, which has seen deaths, has come to 550. France, surprise, again, you see the agitations that they don't want vaccines, 450,000. Turkey, 421. So India is at the 10th place with about 376,000 cases. This basically, if you take a look at the numbers, Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, which is all the reason we mentioned this is we have been reporting rising cases in Japan, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, the Asian ASEAN region. This also shows that the Delta variant is active and the numbers rising in terms of the active cases.
Thank you very much. And can we take a look at India numbers, please, in some detail? Sir, India numbers are up.
So India, we focused on very specifically, we are focused on the vaccines because that number is very critical. It's amazing to see India cross the 553 million mark, and something that they have been aspiring for, of which dose 1 is about 431 million and dose 2 is about 122. When I say dose 2, this is people who have been given both dose 1 and dose 2 is about 122 million. Those who have received dose 1 is 431. So when you combine those numbers, you have at least one dose is about 553 million. The number that is being touted is somewhere around 800 to 900 million will help India to combat the next wave of Delta variant should it come. And the rate of vaccination is now around 7 to 8 million a day. And that again augurs very well. Yesterday or today, yesterday, this is because it's 8.72 million people have been vaccinated. That's a remarkable number. Even if they sustain between 5 and 6 million, you are talking about 120 million vaccines in a given month. July was 75 million, I am told. So if they hit 100 million, then when you take a look at September, August, September, October, November, you would have added another close to 400 million dose 1 vaccines, proportionate correspondent increase in dose 2, getting this dose 1 vaccine numbers to, well close to about 800 to 900 million number, and which I think crosses the threshold of 70%. The universe of India is, I'm told, is about 1.08 billion people. The population may be 1.3, but the 1.08 billion. So 70% is somewhere around that 700 million number. So again, what we wanted to point out is that the numbers do add up, and the numbers look pretty promising to attack and tackle the COVID situation.
And let's take a look at markets now. Markets rose on optimism across all indices. Sridharji, take it away. I have the markets bitmap on the screen now.
So the markets went up yesterday. It was down 100 points, went up 100 points based on three factors: that the retail sales will be up, and there's a comfort factor now emanating. Yes, there's going to be Delta variant, but as is the case that United States will address the Delta variant. Basically, there's also been uptick in the progression of the vaccination numbers. So we saw the markets going up yesterday. Dow went up by 110 points. S&P went up by 11 points. S&P is an all-time record. We'll cover that in a second. The good news is the oil charts. If you take a look at Brent is at 69 and crude is at 67. You take a look at the 10-year, it has dipped by 9 basis points. You only see 0.2. But we have been covering from 1.35 when you look at the daily global insights. It's come to 1.26, which effectively means that people can borrow at lower cost. The cryptocurrencies continue to do well. They are past the 2 trillion. They were up and now they're down by about, yesterday they were down about $365 in Bitcoin, and Ethereum was down about 40.87. So the markets today are down close to 200 points in anticipation of the retail sales. S&P. Now, this particular chart, we have shared similar charts. If you take a look at the March 23rd S&P number, it was 2237. Today it's around 4479. It has doubled. Okay. Now, you can see the V-shaped recovery and the V-shaped curve that is reflected in the S&P chart. S&P chart represents the market index of about 500 companies. We have reported over 80% of the companies have had positive earnings. Positive earnings is driven by 3 factors. 1, it is driven by the pent-up demand. 2, it is driven by the liquidity in the system. And 3rd, low interest rates, which drive the earnings of the companies because the interest costs on the expenses side is lower as a result of. But this is an important chart again for people to notice that the stimulus that was given during that period enabled the V-shaped recovery. February to April is the time frame when the COVID hit. The market dramatically dipped at that point of time. Cash infusion, one single infusion was given, and then there was progressively 3 successive smaller, and then culminating in December, an infusion of $900 billion. The market is recovering, and this begs the question why you need $3.5 trillion. There is some agreement on $560 billion which has been extended to $1.2 trillion or $1 trillion in the infrastructure budget. The calling for additional stimulus is unwarranted, and this chart shows the numbers.
Yes, indeed. And the book that you are referring to, Sridharji, is my new book, Who Painted My State Purple? And with your permission, sir, I'll put up that screen now. Just give me 1 second. So it is up there now. It is available in Amazon.com as an ebook. Viewers can download this and read it. And it's a story of fiction. And you will find a lot of things that you perhaps may have skipped or may have not given a lot of attention, paid attention to on how the 2020 elections played out. We do hope that you support our effort. Sridharji certainly has been very helpful in giving me some reference points and trying to also go over the script and helping me with some of the grammatical edits and so on. Sridharji, thank you once again for taking this time out to share your thoughts on what is happening around the world, sir. And viewers will be back again tomorrow, same time, same place. Do support us. Please, at the beginning of our webcast, please like and share it. That helps us to gain more acceptance across all the social media platforms. We're also going to have some other ways in which we can get this data over to you. We will share those things in the next few episodes. Thanks for joining. Namaskar.
Namaskar. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Again, we had an extended session with a wide range of things, with Afghan being the topmost topic.
Thank you, sir.